Three, two, one. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of the TeslaGeeks Show. I'm Eli.
And I'm Anwar Beck. On this episode, we're going to be, of course, talking about the Tesla stock, which is on fire. And Tesla Model Y gets a $3,000 price cut.
So this week's episode of the TeslaGeeks Show is brought to you by EvanX. EvanX is the Tesla community's accessory store. If you place an order for $100 or more, you can get $10 off with the coupon code TeslaGeeks. All right. So we have a very special guest this week. He is the president of the Denver Tesla Owners Club. He runs a YouTube channel called Sean Mitchell. Very big YouTuber, does a lot in the electric vehicle space and Tesla space, obviously. And he is a Denver area realtor. Please welcome our fellow Tesla geek, Sean Mitchell.
What up? Hey, thanks for having me on. Excited. Finally glad this is happening.
It took way too long, and we're sorry about that. I'm so glad Anwar Beck has his shit together because I don't. So I'm glad we're able to have you on today to talk about everything going on in the Tesla universe.
Let's blame it on the executive assistant that doesn't exist.
Oh, right, the interns.
The interns.
We're actually both interns. So both Eli and I are very good friends with Sean Mitchell. We've met we've known each other for a couple of years now, it seems like. But man, it's great to have you on. Sean does quite a bit. If you guys follow him on YouTube, you know, like he's one of my favorite content creators in the Tesla space.
Definitely has the sexiest voice of any of the content creators in the community.
He's got that radio voice.
Hey, we're going to talk about the biggest electric vehicle manufacturer, but most importantly, they're Stonks. Sean, what's your take on the recent run up? I think today we hit an all-time high of over $17.50 per share, putting Tesla at a $300 billion plus valuation. What's your take?
It's a little exuberant. You know, I think everyone expects for the stock to grow. When it does these large jumps, I always get a little bit cautious. I'm a big believer in the company, their products. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, for Tesla. And I would just like to see maybe a little bit more gradual growth than the breakneck 10 and 20% growth.
It's definitely not for the faint of. It's definitely not for the faint of heart, man. Like
No.
Today, you know what's crazy, Eli? I had some friends text me. They're like, "Oh my God, this looks like Bitcoin." Like several people, I was like, "Oh my God!" I was like, "This isn't Bitcoin." You know what I mean? Pretty nuts.
Yeah, just the rate of return's been insane, and we have a handful of things colliding here, right? And you know, we have what looks like Tesla's on the precipice of S&P inclusion, which, if that is the case, and they are. I have a good sense that there could be a large amount of institutional buying of getting a jump on that move, because when institutional inclusion does happen, there's going to be a large swath of buying of all these institutions that have all these index funds that have what are they going to be moving into? S&P? Is that what Tesla's going into? Yeah, going into S&P are going to have to buy billions of dollars in Tesla shares. So there's going to be a price bump for anybody who waits to get in. And then also, and this is one that I've kind of seen speculated, is short covering, I think, is playing a role here. Sean, what do you think?
Probably a little bit outside of my expertise, but I would not be surprised. Stock is going up. The likelihood of it going up even further with a profitable Q2 looks pretty good, which would then qualify them for the S&P 500. It looks promising. I follow the company. Not so much on the financial side. There's plenty of great people, smart people who do that. But you know, I look at the indicators like volume of sales, enthusiasm of customers, market leading technology that Tesla has, and it all points towards a very successful rest of the 2020, in my opinion.
I do too, especially when you consider that Tesla was only 5% off of their deliveries from this quarter last year, and the factory was shut down for 6 weeks of the quarter due to COVID. And then contrast that with the rest of the auto industry was seeing declines in sales by like 30%. And Tesla, by all metrics for how many days they were actually open and allowed to produce cars, they were showing growth. entering a period where, people were concerned about I mean, it's unreal what we saw happen. Any guesses on what you think we're going to see for the third quarter sales and delivery numbers?
Well, there's a lot of variables that are probably outside of our control going on with the pandemic and economies and presidents. But if everything stays remotely stable, I think it's going to be a monster second half of the year. One thing that we know very little about in terms of what they're going to share on Battery Investor Day, that could have a significant impact. They could implement whatever technology that they show on this day into some of their new vehicles, and it have an instant impact. You have the chatter that this Plaid Model S may be coming to the market, may be released here second half of 2020. And side note, I saw a comment on YouTube earlier today on one of my videos that someone hates the way I say 2020. So I'm just going to say it a few more times in case that person is watching this video. 2020. How else do you say it? 2020?
I don't know.
Anyways, so I think the second half of the year for Tesla is going to be fantastic. And the other thing is the Model Y. I think the Model Y is going to dominate. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a little while, but Model Y I think is going to be a blockbuster hit in North America at a minimum.
So let's go ahead and talk about Model Y, because I think that's playing a role into this stock run up. And also, Tesla just dropped the price of the Model Y by $3,000, and Elon made official on Twitter that they're not going to make the short range version. And this is something that caught a lot of people by surprise, but oddly enough, this is something I actually predicted. It's funny, I was riding to the airport with my Uber driver in Austin, and he's like, oh, what about the Model Y? And he's like, oh, don't you think the Model Y is going to cannibalize sales of the Model 3? And I'm like, I don't think they're ever going to sell the short range Model 3. Model Y. I don't think they will need to. I think it will be compelling enough to keep it at long range, and then they can have the performance spec. And now what Tesla's done with the price point and made that announcement, it's proved it. And I think this makes a ton of sense. But, what are your guys' take on all this?
Now, they may introduce a standard range in the future. They shuffle those battery packs around like nobody's business. Key into the point that he made, though, on Twitter, he thinks that under 250 miles of range is not enough. Well, what if they offer a standard range that's more than 250 miles of range at some point in the future? Maybe they're new battery technology. So I wouldn't put it past them to eventually come out with something that's standard range that's more than the 250. But yeah, I think as of now, they need to be driving the most expensive, best margin Model Ys. So I think that's probably a part that they're playing in this, and they probably know that if they drop the price of the Model Ys, it's going to bring more buyers in for the long range and the performance.
I think in total it makes sense, right? With the pandemic and everything like that, because this is just they had a Model 3 decrease first. Model 3 decreased by $2,000, and S and X got a $5,000 cut, and now Model Y is getting in there. It's kind of like, I think Tesla is kind of preemptively making sure that they're not going to have any issues with demand. They're already crushing it, I feel like, sales-wise, but this hopefully will carry us through the second half of the year and just make sure that we finish strong and hopefully produce and sell over 500,000 cars. I think
I was originally skeptical that 500,000 cars was even a possibility back in June when they were just reopening. But now it seems like a relatively probabilistic outcome, if not a foregone conclusion. Like the rate that Teslas are moving in Shanghai, and then also what's going to start happening is they have full production capacity in Fremont and a full couple quarters worth of deliveries without the world being shut down again. Man, the sky's the limit.
And I was thinking about the Mach-E. I saw that in Vegas months and months ago whenever I was over there. I believe Mach-E is going to start around 60 grand. So if the long range all-wheel drive Model Y starts at 50, who in their right mind, unless you're like a dedicated Ford guy, I don't see why you'd spend an extra $10,000 to get an unproven technology from not that great of an OEM, I guess. I don't know. I hope I'm not saying anything too controversial, but it's just like, it seems crazy.
Us? Controversial? No way.
Yeah, I mean the Mach-E, I think the Mach-E will sell well. It's not too avant-garde. It's not too wild and crazy. It's not like Cybertruck design. And I do think it'll appeal to a lot of Ford fans. It'll probably appeal to people who are anti-Tesla or just, don't want to mess with Tesla and some of the drama that they tend to bring, including their CEO. So I think it'll sell well. I think will it sell as well as Tesla's? Probably not. I would really love to see what they come out with in terms of software for their production vehicles. When I sat in the Mach-E back in November, I think it was really laggy, super laggy software. They needed to do some work on that. They needed to brush it up. And so anyway, so it's a little bit of a side note, but is it going to sell as well as the Model Y? I don't believe so. The Model Y is just such an outstanding vehicle in every way. I can talk more about it if you want, because I just got done spending 24 hours with it. I probably drove 600 or 700 miles in 24 hours. I got a pretty good feel for it.
Yeah,
All
definitely
right.
give us some.
Yeah,
I mean, Eli and I I've seen one. I did a review of one, like walking around, but I've honestly haven't even driven a Model Y. I've been in one at the unveil a year ago, but I think out of the three of us, you probably have had the most exposure. So give us your input.
I think it's the best vehicle that Tesla makes to date. It seems to address affordability, relative affordability. I mean, $50,000, not everyone can afford. I understand that. But amongst their lineup, you address the affordability, you address ride height. So you're sitting up a little bit higher than the Model 3. You have a larger windscreen, so you can see more than the Model 3. And even my S, I feel like maybe there's a little bit more sort of vertical view of outside of the windshield. You have ample headroom for tall dudes. This is going to be your car. And if you don't want to spend, $80,000 on a Model X, this is going to be your car. The passengers in the back, there's ample leg room. I mean, I've done a video review of the Model Y already, and that was one of the things that I highlighted. So I think legroom and headroom in that second row is phenomenal. It's much better than the Model 3. And then you have the hatchback, which allows for plenty of storage. And Tesla plans on adding a third row, so there's obviously enough room to put a third row back there. Maybe not so comfy, but if you don't use a third row or don't buy the third row version, there's just so much storage room and a better opening than the Model 3. And then you've got the drive experience, which feels like a Tesla. But I would say the things that I mentioned before are the things that are really going to help it sell very well globally.
Did you take it out in cold and do any testing with the heat pump? Because I hear so many people rave about how like range loss due to temperature is a non-issue, unlike it has been in all the other cars for a long time.
Well, when they started delivering the Model Y, it was really starting to get warm here. So I did borrow one, but it was probably 60 degrees or something like that. So it really didn't have a need for the heat pump. The true test will probably be this winter. I think they had some initial kinks to work out too with it. It was a little bit noisy. The one that I had was just way too noisy. So I think that they retrofitted a shroud around the heat pump to sort of collect some of that sound that the heat pump was making. And then I saw some other issues about that were creating some noise or some issues with the heat pump. So hopefully it was intentional that they started producing the Model Y as the weather was getting warmer, because then they can iron out all the kinks of just having a new part in a Tesla like that.
Where do you think they're going to take what they've done into Model Y into the speculated Model 2? And I know this is something you had to be looking into because, Tesla, I mean, we know what we're talking about Model 2, right? This mass market car, Elon has kind of wink, wink suggested they might make in their factory in Germany. What do you see Tesla, what they've learned over the past 4 cars that you think they're going to carry through to that vehicle?
I don't know. It's so far in the future, I think, that speculating on it is going to be tough to even get close. They certainly need a less expensive car. And the batteries are probably a large component of making a Tesla less expensive, or an electric vehicle for that matter. It would be nice to address some of those markets where they prefer smaller vehicles. And, some of Europe is certainly in that box. And I think that Elon also talked about a smaller Tesla vehicle made and designed in China too. So it might be possible that the smaller vehicle is appealing for the Asian markets as well. If it's anything like their existing Teslas, it's going to have that Tesla style. It's going to have that Tesla remarkable software, and it's going to have the acceleration and performance of a Tesla. So I'm optimistic. I'm as optimistic as I can be about a vehicle that doesn't exist yet. That's probably 3 to 5 years into the future, I guess.
You said something there that's really important that I didn't appreciate until I got into a Model 3 or drove somebody else's Model S, is that a huge part of the Tesla experience is the Tesla software. That I can go from an S to a 3 to an X to a Y and to potential to whatever they make in the future and still feel like I'm in the same cockpit, even though the screen may be a different direction, but I know what I'm doing. I know how the vehicle is going to respond. And that's something that no other OEM, I feel like, has even yet touched the surface of. And as we get more millennials getting older and older and spending money on cars, I feel like this is something that I'm going to be looking for as an eye to the future, that if I were to ever put any money investing in any legacy automaker, I'm going to be looking at who's tuning in to this customer, because I don't see anybody really addressing them yet.
The software is the dark horse of Tesla. You have their physical products, which are great, but the products that will have some of the best margin for Tesla is going to be their software products. And I've said this and thought this for the last year, maybe 2, that opening up an app store for their vehicles is going to be a whole separate stream of revenue. They can open it up, much like what Apple did and Google Play did for third-party developers. It's going to be, it's stuff that they don't have to necessarily create, but they're getting a cut on every transaction. Every developer that creates an app inside of the car, when someday when these vehicles are self-driving, we're also going to need something to do in the cars. So think Netflix, think Zoom, the platform that we're using to record this conversation. Think Amazon. It will be the next billion-dollar frontier, multi-billion-dollar frontier. They just have to figure out the autonomy piece. So software is a dark horse for Tesla. No one understands it. Not very many people at least understand it unless you understand software. And if you're purely an automotive journalist or an automotive pundit, you don't understand software. It's never been an emphasis in automobiles. It's not an emphasis in traditional automotive makers. Driven a gasoline car, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. Some of the luxury vehicles do it okay, but not to the extent of Tesla. Software is a dark horse.
And something too, in the way that's a good thing you highlighted, that these automotive journalists do not understand software. And even further, these rating systems and grading systems are using to grade a car experience. There is no metric by which they rate a car's software. Not really. It's kind of a byproduct of, usability or, how many things a customer finds difficult, but they've never, there's no metric on what the user experience is on a car. Although there is for literally every cell phone ever made. User experience is actually more important than even the hardware it's got on board. So it's going to be interesting to watch that transition of, I think that's going to be something I'm going to be looking out for, is waiting to see more technology writers start covering automotive as a subsect of technology instead of automotive being its own section. Because it's really and it's really not and I think with electric vehicles is bringing people into the automotive space that would have never considered themselves part of it.
Yeah, those metrics need to change because I don't know if it's Auto Trader. I saw this recently where they're talking about how, like, I think it's now lumped in this like user experience category, but Ford, I believe, did a big overhaul in some of their user interface software stuff, so they got really punished because people imagine like a Ford employee going or a customer going in and not understanding where the buttons are, or like if you have a radical change between one model to another, that's where like, you know, Eli, you're totally right. Like they're gonna have to change that, in my opinion.
I got to say something too about the simplicity. I never appreciated how like distracting and unnerving how many buttons are in a car were until I had a couple years in a Tesla, then got into somebody's gas car that had like the 100 buttons, and like I physically did not want to look at it. Like I found the experience to be overwhelming trying to comprehend this array of inputs that I'm so used to just doing super simply on a touchscreen. It was like, wow. It was literally clouding the experience of being in the car.
Think about the three of us are old enough to remember when mobile communication transitioned from flip phone, feature phone, to smartphone, which is a single piece of glass. You can do a lot more when you have software to be able to write features and functionality onto a touch screen. It makes it more dynamic, it makes it longer lasting and much more engaging. And right now we're seeing the same transition, in my opinion, as people shift from from gas to electric. And you have these software platforms in these vehicles from traditional automakers, and these third-party suppliers have supplied the software for the vehicles. And you have a lot of buttons, physical buttons to be able to engage with the car. It's like a flip phone. And when people experience the smartphone of vehicles, or just, you know, like any electric vehicle that emphasizes software, you're like, oh my God, how did I ever get by before this smartphone? And I could never go back to a feature phone, the flip phone, or, you know, it's just like the buttons, it's the lack of functionality. It just doesn't work. It would never work today.
It gives me a headache to even think about the things we used to try to do on a phone, even so much so the entire way I live my life now and the way I do my work would not be possible if it were not for a smartphone. Like my Tesla adventure, all these things that I do, the fact that literally I can work anywhere there's an internet connection is because what we put on board of this. And very quickly, it's also going to become what we put in our cars. I mean, the big part of that's going to be autonomy, because as soon as autonomy gets solved, even if it's just level 3 for freeways, which is people's primary commute, the amount of productivity time, and even just time to, let's say productivity, even not even just so much as getting work done, freeing the brain for thought is going to have a huge collective impact on society. Imagine if these, millions of smart tech workers, educated people going to work every day actually had an extra 30 minutes a day to think about solving problems instead of having to be paying attention to the road. Scale that across tens of millions and hundreds of millions of people, and I think the impact is going to be really massive. I don't know if you guys are much into science fiction or like the singularity theory and stuff like that, but Werner Vinge put out a paper in the late 90s, I believe it was, talking about how one of our paths to superintelligence, it may actually be the greater collective human consciousness, that we actually may achieve a, quote unquote superintelligence by the accumulation of human intelligence. And self-driving cars may actually have a significant impact in boosting our net cognitive output because we have more time for non-erroneous cognitive activities.
Here's just a wild thought. If the car allows you to do all of these things, could people live in their vehicles? If you can do all of these things that you need to do inside a vehicle, you can video chat with people, you can order delivery food to your vehicle. Will people need homes? Will people want homes if everything exists inside of a vehicle? It's a crazy thought, but maybe.
I'll be the first to do it. As the guy who like goes around the country, goes to Europe and literally sleeps in the car for weeks at a time, once that becomes sustainable to actually live out of, I will be the first to do it.
I love it.
That's my type of life, man. Are you kidding? Could you imagine freeing up the cost? I mean, I pay what, $2,500 a month for my rent. I could own a couple. I could have payments on a couple more Teslas if I wanted for that. Instead, save the money and use that to live my life. Remember, you said this. When you see it happen, you could be like, "Yeah, that was my idea." I could probably do it now, actually, if I didn't have a daughter. All that's missing is I need like a 5G chip in the car so I can actually tether like higher speed internet. But once it has that, I think I could even do it now. Yeah, that's all that's missing. 5G.
You know what I'm envisioning?
Living in
like, no, like, what if somebody built a community for like millennials, people like us, right? Like what do they call those? Like a RV park, but like the common things that you need that wouldn't be in your car. So a place to shower, maybe like a little bit of a lounge area, Tesla charging, gigabit internet. But all you do is you just go park in your spots, and then you get to go hang out with people, and then you just go back to your car. Especially if Tesla one day they'll make like a minivan equivalent, I'm assuming, right? Kind of like a bigger Model X.
I'm going to cut this out of the video because I don't want anyone to know about this investment idea you just dropped on us. I'm so in. If you want to build that, by the way, I think that's brilliant. I would be your first customer.
Why not? Okay, let's transition then. I'll just go in here and transition to the Nikola thing, yeah?
All right, yeah. By the way, I was kidding about cutting that out. We'll let it be in the video.
Oh okay.
It's all right, guys. All right, let's talk about our favorite punching bag of the recent few months. I'll be honest, I consider this a stain on the electric vehicle movement and community. So let's talk about our favorite straw man, Trevor Milton. Where do we? I mean, it happened so quick and so fast. If you get off Twitter for a couple hours, there's been another action. Somebody else is being called out. I mean, you guys are the audience, the Tesla Geek Show audience. They've heard our feelings about this, and we've been sharing this real time on Twitter. But Sean, starting from the most recent events, what do you think about all that's going on?
Well, here's the deal. I just want to preface this by saying that I think everyone should have a chance to succeed in business. And I hope that Nikola does succeed. That being said, I think that there's a lot of obstacles with them succeeding. Things that I've mentioned in previous videos, like refueling infrastructure, for one, I think is going to be quite a challenge for them. But the persona of Trevor doesn't, I don't think, help the company and the brand. It certainly does not help in the eyes of the Tesla community. He's taking credit. He's taking credit for things that he hasn't yet done. He's dismissive in some ways. He's lawsuit happy in other ways when it comes to other electric vehicles and suing them and suing journalists. And Elon does some crazy stuff. So, I've sort of learned to just like try and separate the CEO or the chairman persona and the company and the products that they make. But it's hard to fall back on the products of Nikola because they don't really exist, with the exception of a couple of prototypes. So that's my initial 2 cents. I think that in some ways, not all of them, in some ways, the criticism and skepticism is warranted.
What you said about wanting other people to succeed, I see people say that. A lot of people comment that on Twitter who haven't really been following it that closely. They're just like, oh, why not just hope for them to succeed? And although another EV company succeeding, which there would be great, and there's a lot of ones that we all root for, there's a Barron's article that came out that I think was perfect, and that's Nikola Motors is more of a business plan than it is an actual business. And that's why when people come at that conversation from that angle, I'm like, look, let's actually let them actually be a real company and do something more than talk, and show us designs that are very clearly rendered on, something not much better than PowerPoint. Then we can actually talk about whether or not their ideas are viable. But anytime we try to get into substance about, okay, how are you going to manufacture your cars? Well, one day we're going to do it and be vertically integrated. The next day we're going to have a partner do it. Oh, which partner's going to do it? Oh, we'll let you know later. We're still figuring that out. Like all of the actual details of execution, which in the automotive space, that's where the devil's at. The devil is in manufacturing, production, and execution. There's tons of things that can go wrong. We saw Biden, by the way, just went belly up, and they had billions invested in, billions and billions. They've got manufacturing facilities set. They've actually had, cars come off the assembly lines, and they went belly up. They couldn't raise the money they needed during the COVID fallout. And they're billions of dollars down the line and much further ahead than Nikola. They're even at a point that we can talk about their potential success. Rivian's got billions of dollars in, but they're not ready to push a car off the assembly line. I'd say they're much further than Nikola. But none of these other guys are coming out claiming that they've already done it. They're not saying, hey, me and Tesla and Elon have already changed the world. We're the reason why everyone's going electric. They're kind of keeping their heads down and trying to execute and hoping to God they can make it and survive. Because we saw with Tesla, starting a new auto manufacturer and making it, like I think Gally covered this really well. Tesla wasn't profitable until they made like their 300 and something thousandth car. And it took a ton of years to get there. Like making a successful automaker is a huge undertaking, even after you start shipping cars to be successful. So when somebody's coming out claiming that they've already changed the world and they're the reason the world's changing, when they haven't even delivered something in a space that has had very few new entrants in 100 years, because the cost of entry, it's like how can we take it seriously? And then when you throw in the fact that, they're using hydrogen, which has major problems. And then as Anwar Beck said in 2016, what were they doing in 2016? They said they were going to be?
Natural gas is how they started out originally, apparently. So that's what bothers me about them. It's just like they keep pivoting to like whatever you want to hear. Like, hey, what do you want this thing to be, basically, is kind of how I perceive it. So originally it was like they're going to make natural gas vehicles. They're going to build out like 50 some natural gas refueling stations. And then a couple of years later, now it's hydrogen. And then I think they saw Tesla succeeding. They're like, oh, never mind. It's going to be hydrogen/electric. Like it just totally, I think, Eli, you hit the nail on the head. It's a business plan and a marketing company. Like, not that they're doing that well. Clearly, they just raised $24 billion in this IPO. Their market cap is 100. At this valuation of $24 billion, they're 110 times their own cash flow projections. Just to put it in perspective. Like Tesla, I think Kathy Wood from ARC mentioned this, is like the absolute bear case for Tesla that they have in 2024, even if they don't get autonomy figured out, is 7 to 8 times cash flow. I mean, Tesla is clearly making money, and you multiply that out to get their valuation, but Nikola is just like, it's not in the real world, in the real realm.
So Nikola has now sparked a new wave of its own, and maybe you can comment on this, Sean. We now have several other clean energy startup companies that are now seeing the success, and I say success, let me put this in air quotes, the success Nikola had with raising money and getting a market valuation by doing a reverse listing. So we've had a couple more of these happen the past weeks. The most recent one that was finalized, I think today announced, was, what is it?
Spartan Energy. Spartan Energy was acquired or whatever. They're merging with Fisker.
Acquisition by Fisker. Sean, what do you think about this new wave of these startup EV companies reverse mergering now to get a listing to gain access to capital?
I mean, it's fine if you've got the products. I guess the thing with Fisker is that they do have some prototypes, but I don't recall if they've got a manufacturing plant. Do they have a manufacturing plant to produce the cars? And they've got a lot of ambitions. They haven't come out with the Emotion yet, and that one's said to have some really sort of far out specs in terms of battery technology. It's a lot of pointing towards the future instead of today. And I think that's the most frustrating part. Companies have long talked about, even large automotive companies have talked about, electric vehicles are coming. They're in our future. We're going all electric. But so far, only a few have managed to actually produce vehicles, and even a smaller amount have managed to produce commercially successful electric vehicles. So I'm extremely cynical about Fisker. Beautiful looking cars, but show me the damn money. Like, get this thing to production, get some wheels on the road, and then I'll be a little bit more willing to sing their praises.
And here's something too, and this is, not specific financial advice. We're not financial advisors, but just something to be aware of. Unlike Nikola, which I do believe their listing strategy was done intentionally to avoid financial scrutiny, whether or not these other companies that do it are not. One of the downsides as an investor, as a retail investor, getting into a company that's listed via reverse merger is we don't get any transparency on the company's financials. So when a company does a traditional IPO, a large financial institution gets involved, audits the company, determines the fair market price of the IPO, and that involves a lot of scrutiny. And one of the reasons that's done that way is to protect retail investors from financial frauds. In fact, there's a lot of articles about this on the SEC website and the FINRA website. There's a great article called Wake Up and Smell the Pump and Dump. And one of the pump and dump, by the way, is a strategy when somebody gets a company on the stock market, they hype it up, early investors sell out their shares, and then the whole thing crashes to zero at the cost of retail investors. One of the main indicators to look out for as a red flag of a potential pump and dump is a reverse merger. And the SEC actually gave another comment, which is that regardless of whether companies were pump and dump and frauds or ended up being a scam, companies that participate in a reverse merger activity rarely ever stay liquid and survive, period. So it's a move that historically does not lead to, like, companies who do this move historically are unsuccessful, far more than any other company that ever makes it to the stock exchange. So that's just something to be aware of as you look at these companies, that just because a company is listed doesn't mean they got there in the same way a lot of these other companies did.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, man. This was so much fun. Where can our listeners follow you and keep up with what's going on YouTube and different other places? Maybe your Twitter handle and stuff.
Yeah, pretty active on Twitter. It's Sean M. Mitchell, and YouTube is, you can search Sean Mitchell, or it should come up when you type in All Things EV, which is sort of the sub name of the channel. And I talk about all things EV. So find me there, hit me up, let me know that you came from hearing the TeslaGeeks podcast.
And also, if you need real estate help in the Denver area, you know who to call.
I'm your dude.
The Tesla realtor in Denver, for sure.
We'll include his link in the description of this video. Sean seriously is a great guy. So if you're going to be going to the Denver area, which if I ever move there, you better still be there so you can be my realtor. I don't want any referral handoffs.
Yeah.
But Sean, I just want to say it's a true pleasure to have you join us. And to everyone, thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the TeslaGeeks Show.
I like Sean's.
Yeah, buddy.